Hi everyone, you're here sewing with Cody and Pete. And in today's video, I want to show you how to use your sewing machine to create a simple quilt label. So you can do this instead of having to do it on your embroidery machine, or if you don't have an embroidery machine, here is a way to make a simple quilt label using your sewing machine and using your decorative stitches or your alphabet stitches really. Because alphabet stitches on a sewing machine are really just decorative stitches that just so happen to be an alphabet. So remember, if you like the video, if you learned something, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. And so let's get started with making a simple little quilt label on our sewing machine. Alright, so here we are. We're on the BERNINA 770, but this applies to any of the BERNINA machines really. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making a quilt label. So basically, made for, made by, and the year. You can put whatever you want, but this is just something basic. So what I did is I just got cotton fabric and I put one of our absolute favorite interfacings on the back, and this is by Pellon. It's just Shape Flex, and so it's fusible. And a steam iron makes all the difference in the world. So it's fused to the back. It comes in white and black. So it fuses to the back of our fabric. And so you need some type of stabilization when you're just working with one layer of fabric, especially with some of these decorative stitches. So I've got two pieces of fabric. I'll explain that in a second. But I'm also using my open toe embroidery foot number 20C, or if you've got 20D, or if you have just a regular 20, it depends on what machine you've got. There are a number of other feet you can use, like 39. Or 6, but you want something that where the center is raised so those thicker stitches can slide and glide right underneath the foot after they've been created. But what makes the number 20 so nice is that it is open toe, so we can ride the inside edge with our lines that we have drawn to make sure we keep everything nice and straight. That's just one of the methods, or one of the ways, and one of the reasons why we're using number 20. But like I said, there are some other feet you can use. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating each individual row, and I want to have it stitched out on a practice piece so I can make sure it stitches out how I want it, make sure everything lines up how I want, but most importantly is so I can measure each row. So when I go and put it on my final piece, I know exactly where I need to start my row so they line up in the center, so you don't have rows that just look all like I just threw it on fabric. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to start with our sample fabric, which is the same exact fabric, and interface the same exact way, because you want to make sure that everything works out right. So one thing, best advice, whenever you are getting ready to do something different, something you haven't done before, or something that could be a little tricky, or there's always a different turnout. Whenever you're sampling something, always make sure your controls are the same. So we work with the same fabric, same thread, same settings, same situation as our finished product piece. So you know if you need to tweak anything, you know you need to do that, and you figure it out when you're doing it on your sample fabric. Best advice. Because if you just put a piece of scrap fabric underneath here and just kind of just went with it, and then you went to a totally different type of fabric, interfaced or not interfaced or whatever, and that was your final piece, and you went and did it, and it just may not turn out exactly how it turned out here because the variables were different. So let's just start. So we'll look at our screen here. So what we're going to do is, first of all, we're going to want to go to our combination mode, which on this machine and most of all the BERNINA machines is a little plus sign here. So when I come here, I can see the screen changes just a little bit. This is our combination mode, our combi mode. So then we're going to want to go to alphabets. So I can come to my alphabet here. This machine has a few to choose from. So the best thing to do is to select which alphabet you want. I'll go with the simplest one, just to make matters easy. And then see this little arrow here. I can click this and the screen will completely open up so I can see a much larger area, and then when I start typing you'll see them appear up here. But the best part of doing this is we can then easily switch back and forth between uppercase, lowercase numbers and symbols. And so if I wanted to make something that said made for Petrie, I can type that in, you'll see it here. And so if I click the capital M, I can then select the lowercase m, and I can go and finish the word. So a question I get all the time is, how do I space out my words or letters? So what we can do here is we can go to our symbols. So I can go to our symbol, and the underscore symbol is how we space things. So I can do made, and then I can go back to that capital, go to the F, go to the lowercase, and then type the rest. Where you at? Type the rest that I want. Then I can go back to the symbol, go to lowercase underscore, and then I can type in the person's name or bird's name. All right, so here I've got made for Petrie. I saw it and I can scroll through. So if I needed to delete a letter, or if I forgot, I spelled it incorrectly, and I need to insert a letter. So just say if I needed to insert a letter before, like this R, I can select the R, and let's see what she does. So if I select, say, a K, it will actually insert the K after the R. So okay, so I need to insert the K before the R. So then I would select the letter before that and then say now. So now it will insert the new letter or symbol or pattern between those two letters. That's not what I want, but I want to show you that you can scroll through and select individual letters, and if you added something you didn't want to add, you go and select it and you can delete it. So let's close this window. So now we can see all of our letters here. So you can see there's 15 different symbols or characters. So let's start from the beginning. And you kind of scroll through it just to make sure you did everything correctly. So let's go and stitch this out and see what we get. And as you're stitching, you'll see that particular letter or design highlight in blue, so you know exactly what pattern you're on. And what you're going to do is when you reach the last pattern in your sentence, for instance, you're going to want to hit your pattern end button. So it's going to finish that very last letter, and then it's going to stop. You don't want to start stitching the very first letter in your sequence. So here we're on pattern 15 of 15, the very last one. So I'm going to hit my pattern end button, and it's going to finish that pattern, and then it's going to stop for me. So here is my first sentence, my first row, made for Petrie. Super simple, perfect. So now, as long as that looks nice and good, we can then go and do our next sentence. However, what we want to do is we want to save this. We don't want to have to type this all over again for here. So we have it selected, or we have it up here. So we'll go to our little heart, and we'll go to the manila folder. You can see there's 3 different manila folders, but this manila folder has an arrow going into it. We're putting something in that folder to put in the filing cabinet. So we'll select that icon here, and let's see. Oops. So we'll just say, we can see it right here. We'll click it, click save. So now we need to delete this because we need to add something new. So we go to the I. So we are going to come to this icon here. This is our select all. So select everything and hit the trash can, and then it'll delete it. Are you sure? Yes. So now I can exit out of here, go back to my alphabet, and we're still in combination mode. Select the same font or a different one, open up that window. So we had made for Petrie, and then you can say made by, or whatever you want to say, underscore, so we can say made by Cody. But if we wanted to, we can always add another decorative stitch. So let's just say if I wanted to add, we can go to our decorative stitches, and if I wanted to add a little novelty stitch, a little heart, like a little star either before or after, a little dog, a little butterfly, if there was something you wanted to add, you can always go and add that to our combination mode. So let's say if you want to do a little star, you can always add a little star after our stitches. So you always have that option. So you see, this is how the star, you can always insert patterns here. And so if you're on this screen and you want to delete something, the star or the M is selected. So, but you need to go to the I, and there's a little trash can there as well. You can easily delete that. And also, if I wanted to delete that star at the end, I can go on to the end, have it selected, and hit the trash can. But let's go and start from the beginning and start stitching and see what it looks like. You could say made with love, you can, whatever you want to say, you can have it all typed out here and then go and stitch it. And by having it stitched on our sample fabric, we'll know the size it's going to be, so we know how to line it up. Because each row is most likely going to be a different length, and you want to make sure you start at the right position so they all kind of line up nicely. So once we reach the last letter, you can hit pattern end, and they'll finish it. So there it is. So now let's go and choose the last row, which is typically going to be the year. So we want to save this first. So we'll come to the heart, go here, and there it is. We'll just hit save. So now we can go back to the I, do select all, and delete it all. So now let's go and back to our alphabet, back to our font, open this up so we can see it. So we can say spring, spring 2021. Oop. So let's see how she stitches out. Now when it comes to doing fonts and letters on a machine, this is where the 9mm stitch width machine truly shines. Because we can do nice, big, beautiful fonts that are very legible, they're a decent size, they're excellent size, especially for a quilt label or a label inside of a garment or whatever. An excellent size because we have the option of that 9mm. We can always make them smaller, but we can't make them any bigger than the 9mm. But if you are dealing with a machine that is only 5.5mm, your fonts are going to be a little bit on the smaller side. But you can't make them any bigger. But still, you have an excellent size for making quilt labels. So let's go and measure these guys out so we know the length of each one, so we'll know kind of how to justify and lay them all out here. Because ironically, it looks pretty good how I actually started them out here. They kind of have that center justification, which is what I was going for. Because I basically want to find the center of each one, kind of line them up so I'll know how far to measure out and see where I need to start stitching on our label here. Alright, so I have a 6.5-inch Creative Grid ruler, which works out fine. You can use any type of ruler you've got. So let's go and measure basically from the start to the end of each pattern. It doesn't have to be perfect. So here we are dealing with about a 3.5-inch length for our first row. The second one is about 3.25, and the last one is about a little over 2.5. We're just going to say 2.5. It's not worth all those extra fractions. So here we need to find the center. So we'll just divide these numbers up, and then here I've already measured the center markings, so then I can just measure how much over. So for instance, with the Made for Pete, which is 3.5 inches long, that's going to be 1 3/4 half of it's 1 3/4. The made by Cody, which is 3 1/4, is going to be 1 5/8. And then the spring 2020 is 2 1/2. So that's going to be 1 1/4. So then what we'll do is we'll come here and then measure over. So the first one's 1 3/4. So then we'll measure 1 3/4 over. The second one is 1 5/8. And the last one is 1 1/4. So here are our center markings. Oops, can't see it. Here are our center markings, and here's where we need to start each row in order to get them to line up in the center. So the center of these to line up in the center of here. Hopefully I did my math correctly. We will find out. So what we can do, we've already saved the first two. We haven't saved the last one. So we can either save the last one so we have them all three saved, or we can just start stitching from the last one and then we won't have to worry about saving it. So what we're going to do is we're using the number 20C foot. So we're going to ride this line with the inside toe of this foot here. And we're going to want to make sure we start at that point. So we can see here, we're starting about right in the center. Perfect. So let's start well, actually, let's back up a little bit. There we are. So let's start stitching. So we want to make sure we keep that line nice and straight with the inside toe here. So here we have our first row. So now let's go and select our next one. Just for security reasons, I'm going to save this because you never know what might happen. So let's go and retrieve what our other two rows. So we'll go to the heart and we'll go to this icon here. So one thing to pay attention to, or one thing to notice, is we have to be in combination mode in order to retrieve combination mode created designs. Because if we're not in combination mode, that icon isn't there to retrieve those stitches like it is here. So we'll come here, and the next one is made by Cody, which is this one. So here he is. So we're going to line it up right here and start stitching. So there's the second row. Now remember, these lines that are drawn on here, they're all drawn with a friction pen or like a friction marker. These are some of my absolute favorite. So all those lines are going to go away when you hit it with the iron. So don't panic that the baseline of each row isn't directly on that line. What we're doing is we're lining up the foot and using this as a guide. And so if you notice the G, the bottom of the P, the Y here, they're lining up with the line because that's as far as it can go with our foot. So I don't want you to panic. I know that question would be coming up while watching it. We're using the line as a guide to keep everything nice and straight. So as long as we're consistent, everything will be perfect. So now let's go and retrieve our last one, which is actually our first one, which is made for Petrie. And we're going to start here. We'll lower that foot, line it up there, and start stitching. So here we are. Here's our very simple but perfect little quilt label. In my opinion, this is so much easier than doing it on the embroidery machine for many reasons. One, I didn't have to worry about hooking up my embroidery module. I didn't have to do anything special. I just had to draw some lines so I knew where it needed to be, but that took all of 20 seconds. I was able to easily type what I needed, but most importantly, I was able to choose and use little bitty fonts that I could make even smaller than this. And this is very difficult to do with embroidery fonts, to get them this small. Most of our machines don't have fonts built in that are this size, that will stitch out this size. So this is a question that I've gotten, or complaints, I should say, that I've gotten, that customers have tried to make quilt labels, and they take a font that's naturally 1.5 inches, and they try to make it, a 1/2 inch tall. They try to make it really small. You can't turn designs that small. You can't reduce them that small. The machine will allow you to do that, but it has a tendency to jam up the machine because they're taking satin stitch designs or satin stitch fonts and trying to make them itty bitty. It just can't do it. It's just not capable. It's just too much stitching in one place. You have to choose fonts that are naturally digitized to be small from the get-go. So you don't have to make them any smaller. They're naturally smaller. That is the beauty of using the decorative fonts on the sewing side of the machine, and especially a 9mm stitch width machine allows you to make some big, beautiful decorative stitches, and of course decorative fonts. So now from here, what I can do is I can use the edge here, and I can use that to fold over my fabric and press it. So I can either hand stitch it on the back of my quilt or the back of my project, or I can still fold them over, trim it up so it's more consistent. 1/4 inch is all you need. And so I can easily fold it over all the way around, and then I can sew it onto my quilt by hand or by machine. And then all these markings, because I did use the friction pen, will all go away with heat, and I've got my perfect little label. You can always spruce it up by adding some decorative stitches. Or you can even add some little embroidery if you wanted to. It's completely up to you. It is a quilt label that is made to be customized to whatever you want. If it's a donation quilt, a giveaway quilt, a charity quilt, something like this is simple. Many people don't even put anything on their quilts. But I just wanted to create a video showing how simple it is to make a quilt label using your sewing machine. And how to set it up using the measuring techniques, using the correct feet, and the fonts that are built into your sewing machine. So hopefully this helped. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, happy sewing!